December 9, 2018. A luxury hotel in Jaipur, India. Gerald Cotten, the 30-year-old founder of Canada's largest cryptocurrency exchange, QuadrigaCX, collapses suddenly. Within hours, he's pronounced dead. The official cause: complications from Crohn's disease. His widow, Jennifer Robertson, returns to Canada with his body and a shocking revelation. Her husband was the only person who knew the passwords to QuadrigaCX's cold wallets, digital vaults containing over $250 million in customer cryptocurrency. The money, it seemed, had vanished forever. To understand how $250 million could disappear overnight, we need to go back. Gerald Cotten wasn't always a crypto king. He started QuadrigaCX in 2013, when Bitcoin was still a fringe technology, known more for dark web transactions than mainstream investment. But Cotten had vision. He built QuadrigaCX into Canada's most trusted cryptocurrency exchange, a platform where ordinary Canadians could buy and sell Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other digital currencies. By 2018, QuadrigaCX processed over $1 billion in trades annually. Cotten was living the dream, traveling the world with his new wife, investing in real estate, and sailing on yachts. But even before Cotten's death, cracks were beginning to show. In late 2018, customers started complaining about withdrawal delays. People who wanted to cash out their investments found themselves waiting weeks, then months. QuadrigaCX blamed banking problems, regulatory hurdles, anything to buy time. The company claimed that traditional banks were hostile to cryptocurrency businesses, making it difficult to process transactions. Many customers were frustrated, but they waited. After all, QuadrigaCX was Canada's most established exchange. Surely the problems were temporary. Then came the news from India, and everything changed. Jennifer Robertson, Cotten's widow, filed an affidavit with the Nova Scotia Supreme Court in early 2019. Her statement was extraordinary. She explained that Jerry had always been secretive about the technical operations of QuadrigaCX. She had no access to his laptop, which was encrypted. She didn't know the passwords to the cold wallets where customer funds were stored. She claimed that Jerry had operated the entire exchange largely by himself, keeping critical information locked away. The implication was devastating. Without those passwords, 115,000 customers would never see their money again. It was a digital fortune locked in an unbreakable safe. Almost immediately, people started asking questions. How could a professional cryptocurrency exchange, handling hundreds of millions of dollars, rely on one person's memory for passwords? Why weren't there backup systems, multiple signatures, or any of the standard security protocols used by legitimate exchanges? The timing seemed suspicious too. Cotten died just as withdrawal problems were escalating, just as customers were becoming more vocal, just as the company's financial situation appeared increasingly dire. And he died abroad, in India, where verifying death records would be complicated. For investigators and angry customers alike, it seemed less like a tragedy and more like a perfectly staged exit. Here's where cryptocurrency's transparency became both a blessing and a curse. Unlike traditional banking, where transactions are private, cryptocurrency transactions are recorded permanently on public blockchains. Anyone can see where funds move, even if they can't identify the owners. Investigators began tracing QuadrigaCX's wallets. What they found was shocking. Many of the wallets that supposedly held customer funds were empty, and had been for months. Some had never contained the amounts QuadrigaCX claimed. The money hadn't been locked away when Cotten died. It had already disappeared long before. Ernst & Young, appointed as the monitor overseeing QuadrigaCX's bankruptcy proceedings, launched a comprehensive investigation. They hired blockchain experts and forensic accountants to follow the money. What emerged was a pattern of deception spanning years. Investigators discovered that Cotten had created fake accounts on his own exchange, using aliases to trade against real customers. He would credit these accounts with cryptocurrency that didn't exist, then use those phantom funds to manipulate markets and cover withdrawals. It was a shell game played with digital tokens, and Cotten was the dealer who controlled every card. The scale of the deception was staggering. Ernst & Young's investigation uncovered that Cotten had created at least 14 fake accounts. Through these accounts, he had effectively stolen customer deposits and gambled them away on other exchanges. The numbers told a damning story. QuadrigaCX owed its customers $214 million. But the company only had assets worth $33 million. The gap wasn't just large, it was catastrophic. And it had grown over years of systematic theft disguised as legitimate business operations. The pattern was familiar to anyone who'd studied financial fraud. Cotten was running a Ponzi scheme. When early customers wanted to withdraw funds, he paid them using deposits from new customers. When that wasn't enough, he used his fake accounts to generate artificial balances, creating money out of thin air to cover withdrawals. As long as more money came in than went out, the scheme could continue. But Ponzi schemes always collapse eventually. They require endless growth, and when growth slows, the whole structure crumbles. By late 2018, QuadrigaCX was facing that inevitable reckoning. Withdrawals exceeded deposits. The house of cards was falling. Investigators discovered another troubling pattern. Cotten had transferred millions of dollars from QuadrigaCX to personal accounts on other exchanges. But he wasn't just stealing, he was gambling. Records showed massive, reckless trades on platforms like Kraken and Poloniex. Cotten would make enormous bets on cryptocurrency price movements and lose spectacularly. He was using customer money as his personal casino bankroll. One account alone showed losses of over $28 million. This wasn't a sophisticated investment strategy. It was addiction, compulsion, and a catastrophic disregard for the people whose money he was supposed to protect. While customers' funds evaporated, Cotten was living extravagantly. He and Jennifer Robertson spent lavishly, buying expensive real estate, luxury cars, and a yacht. They purchased a boat called the Gulliver for $600,000. They acquired properties across Nova Scotia worth millions. They traveled constantly, staying in five-star hotels. All of this was funded by what investigators later identified as stolen customer deposits. Cotten wasn't just running a failing business. He was looting it, converting other people's Bitcoin into personal wealth, all while maintaining the facade of a successful entrepreneur. As evidence of fraud mounted, skeptics returned to the original question: was Cotten really dead? The circumstances of his death seemed almost too convenient. He died in India, a country where documentation can be unreliable and death certificates can be obtained through less than legitimate means. He was cremated quickly, eliminating the possibility of future exhumation. Some customers demanded proof. They wanted the body exhumed and DNA tested. They pointed to previous cases where people had faked their deaths to escape fraud charges. Could Cotten have staged the ultimate exit, paying for a false death certificate and fleeing with whatever funds he could salvage? Online communities became obsessed with the case. Reddit threads exploded with amateur investigators analyzing every detail of Cotten's life and death. Some discovered that Cotten had been involved in a previous online scam years earlier, suggesting a pattern of fraudulent behavior. Others found inconsistencies in the story of his illness and death. The collective investigation uncovered photographs, social media posts, and digital breadcrumbs that professional investigators might have missed. The internet, it turned out, never forgets. And when 115,000 people lose their money, some of them have the time, skills, and motivation to become very thorough investigators. One detail particularly raised eyebrows. Cotten and Robertson had traveled to India ostensibly to open an orphanage. They'd announced charitable intentions, positioning themselves as philanthropists. But investigators found little evidence of any actual orphanage project. No property had been purchased. No permits filed. No local officials contacted. It appeared to be a cover story, a noble-sounding reason to travel to India that would deflect suspicion. Why would anyone question a young couple trying to help orphans? The charitable facade was, like so much else in Cotten's life, a carefully constructed illusion designed to mask something darker. Cotten's supposed medical history also came under scrutiny. He claimed to suffer from Crohn's disease, a serious inflammatory bowel condition. His death was attributed to complications from this disease during travel in India. But investigators found inconsistencies. Medical experts noted that while Crohn's disease can be serious, sudden death from it is relatively rare, especially in a young man who'd been healthy enough to travel internationally. Some customers requested his medical records from Canadian doctors. If Cotten had been genuinely ill, there should be extensive documentation. But obtaining and verifying these records proved difficult, and the questions remained unanswered. The human cost of QuadrigaCX's collapse was devastating. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were life savings, retirement funds, money set aside for children's education. One customer, who'd lost over $70,000, spoke to reporters about the impact. His words captured the broader tragedy. Thousands of people had trusted Cotten with their financial futures, believing they were investing in legitimate cryptocurrency. Instead, they'd been unwitting participants in an elaborate fraud. Some victims fell into depression. Others faced bankruptcy. The ripple effects extended to families, to careers, to lives upended by one man's greed. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police opened a criminal investigation into QuadrigaCX and Gerald Cotten in 2019. But they faced extraordinary challenges. How do you prosecute a dead man? If Cotten was truly deceased, criminal charges were impossible. The focus shifted to Jennifer Robertson and other potential accomplices. Had Robertson known about the fraud? Was she complicit, or an innocent spouse? The RCMP examined bank records, interviewed witnesses, and traced cryptocurrency transactions. They worked with international partners, because cryptocurrency fraud crosses borders effortlessly. The investigation continued for years, slow and methodical, building a case that might never see a courtroom. Jennifer Robertson maintained that she knew nothing about her husband's fraud. She cooperated with investigators, turning over assets including the yacht and multiple properties. She gave interviews expressing shock and betrayal, claiming she was as much a victim as anyone. Her legal team argued that Jerry had kept her completely isolated from QuadrigaCX's operations, that he'd lied to her as thoroughly as he'd lied to customers. Some believed her. Others were skeptical, pointing to the lavish lifestyle and the millions in assets she'd enjoyed. The truth about her knowledge and involvement remained ambiguous, trapped in the gray area between naivety and complicity. Ernst & Young worked to recover whatever assets they could for QuadrigaCX's creditors. They liquidated the yacht, the properties, and other tangible assets. They hired specialists to try to crack Cotten's encrypted laptop, hoping to access any remaining cryptocurrency. Some funds were recovered from various exchanges where Cotten had accounts. But the process was agonizingly slow and the returns minimal. After years of effort, creditors were looking at recovering perhaps 30 cents on the dollar at best. For someone who'd lost $100,000, they might get back $30,000. The majority of the wealth had simply vanished. QuadrigaCX's collapse exposed massive gaps in cryptocurrency regulation. In Canada and most countries, cryptocurrency exchanges operated in a legal gray zone. They weren't regulated like banks or investment firms. They didn't need to maintain reserves, undergo audits, or follow the strict rules that protect traditional financial customers. QuadrigaCX had no insurance, no government oversight, no external verification of its claimed holdings. It was essentially an unregulated private company asking people to trust it with millions of dollars. The disaster prompted calls for reform, for bringing cryptocurrency exchanges under the same regulatory framework as other financial institutions. QuadrigaCX wasn't an isolated incident. The cryptocurrency world has seen numerous exchange collapses, some from hacks, others from fraud. QuadrigaCX, once the world's largest Bitcoin exchange, collapsed in 2014 after losing hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins. BitConnect turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. Cryptopia was hacked and bankrupted. The pattern repeated: rapid growth, promises of security, then sudden catastrophic failure. Each collapse left thousands of victims and billions in losses. QuadrigaCX was simply the most dramatic Canadian example of a global problem. The cryptocurrency revolution had created new opportunities, but also new vulnerabilities that fraudsters eagerly exploited. In late 2019, a group of QuadrigaCX customers formally petitioned to have Gerald Cotten's body exhumed and subjected to post-mortem examination and DNA testing. They raised funds to cover the costs. They hired lawyers to navigate the complex legal requirements. The petition argued that the suspicious circumstances, combined with the enormous financial stakes, justified disturbing Cotten's grave. But the request faced legal and ethical hurdles. Exhumation requires compelling evidence of foul play or misidentification. Jennifer Robertson opposed the petition, calling it ghoulish and unnecessary. She insisted her husband was truly dead and deserved to rest in peace. The exhumation petition ultimately failed. Canadian courts ruled that despite the suspicious circumstances, there wasn't sufficient evidence to justify exhuming Cotten's body. The legal standard is high, requiring more than suspicion or financial motive. Without concrete proof that the death certificate was fraudulent or that Cotten might still be alive, disturbing the grave couldn't be justified. For believers in the death hoax theory, this was frustrating but not conclusive. They argued that the legal system's reluctance was allowing a criminal to escape justice. For others, it was the right decision, respecting both the law and basic human dignity. In 2022, a Netflix documentary titled Trust No One: The Hunt for the Crypto King brought the QuadrigaCX story to a global audience. The documentary interviewed victims, investigators, and cryptocurrency experts. It presented the evidence for both theories, that Cotten had died as reported, or that he'd faked his death and fled. The filmmakers tracked down leads, traveled to India, and spoke with people who'd known Cotten. But even with all their resources and investigation, they couldn't definitively answer the central question. The documentary concluded ambiguously, acknowledging that without a body or concrete proof of life, the truth might never be known. Some investigators traveled to India to verify Cotten's death independently. They visited the hospital in Jaipur where he allegedly died. They interviewed staff, reviewed records, and examined the death certificate. What they found was inconclusive. The hospital confirmed that someone matching Cotten's description had been treated there and died. But in India's complex healthcare system, verifying details years after the fact proved difficult. Staff had changed. Records were incomplete. The possibility of fraudulent documentation couldn't be entirely ruled out. The India trail, which seemed promising, ended in the same ambiguity that characterized the entire case. The QuadrigaCX disaster taught the cryptocurrency community harsh lessons about security and trust. The fundamental principle emerged clearly: not your keys, not your coins. Storing cryptocurrency on an exchange means trusting someone else with your wealth, and that trust can be catastrophically misplaced. Security experts recommended that serious cryptocurrency investors use hardware wallets, maintain their own private keys, and never leave large amounts on exchanges longer than necessary for trading. The convenience of exchange custody came with enormous risk. QuadrigaCX proved that even the most trusted, most established platforms could be hollow shells concealing fraud. In the wake of QuadrigaCX, Canadian regulators began developing stricter rules for cryptocurrency exchanges. New requirements mandated that exchanges maintain adequate reserves, undergo regular audits, and implement security protocols including multi-signature wallets and disaster recovery plans. Exchanges would need to prove they actually held the assets they claimed. Insurance requirements were discussed. Some provinces began requiring licensing. The changes came too late for QuadrigaCX victims, but they might prevent future disasters. However, cryptocurrency's global nature meant that fraud could simply migrate to less regulated jurisdictions. The regulatory arms race between authorities and fraudsters continued. Forensic psychologists who reviewed the case identified Cotten as a classic case of financial sociopathy. He exhibited traits common to many fraudsters: charm, intelligence, grandiosity, and a complete lack of empathy for victims. Cotten could look customers in the eye, shake their hands, and reassure them their money was safe, all while actively stealing it. He could post cheerful vacation photos while people whose life savings he'd taken begged for their money back. This psychological disconnect between outward presentation and internal reality is characteristic of successful con artists. They don't just lie to others. They construct entire alternate realities. Legal experts pointed to historical precedents that eerily paralleled QuadrigaCX. In 2012, a man named John Darwin faked his death in a canoeing accident to escape debt, only to be discovered alive years later. In the 1970s, British politician John Stonehouse disappeared while swimming, presumed drowned, but was found alive in Australia. Faking one's death to escape financial or legal consequences has a long history. The method varies: canoe accidents, drowning, foreign deaths with questionable documentation, but the pattern repeats. These cases prove that death hoaxes, while difficult, are possible. They gave credence to theories that Cotten might have attempted the same escape. Blockchain analysts continued tracking cryptocurrency movements long after Cotten's death. They identified patterns suggesting that some of QuadrigaCX's supposedly lost funds had moved after Cotten died. Small amounts of cryptocurrency appeared to transfer from wallets associated with the exchange to new addresses. Were these automated transfers? Hackers exploiting the chaos? Or evidence that Cotten was alive and accessing funds? The movements were ambiguous and could be explained multiple ways. But they kept the conspiracy theories alive. In cryptocurrency, the blockchain preserves every transaction forever. If Cotten was alive and accessing stolen funds, those transactions would eventually reveal a pattern. If QuadrigaCX was a fraud involving multiple people, someone beyond Cotten had to know. Former employees, business partners, banking contacts. Yet no credible whistleblower ever emerged. No insider came forward with definitive proof of a conspiracy or death hoax. This absence was telling. Either Cotten truly operated alone, which seemed almost impossible given the complexity of running an exchange, or everyone involved was sufficiently complicit or scared to remain silent. The lack of whistleblowers didn't prove innocence or guilt. It simply deepened the mystery, suggesting that whatever happened, Cotten had been extraordinarily effective at compartmentalizing information. QuadrigaCX victims formed support groups and online communities, sharing information and coping strategies. They created detailed spreadsheets tracking the investigation. They hired private investigators. They lobbied government officials for stronger regulations. In their shared loss, they found solidarity. Some dedicated enormous time to amateur investigation, becoming experts in blockchain analysis and cryptocurrency security. Their community represented something beyond financial loss. It was a collective trauma, a shared experience of betrayal that bonded strangers together. They refused to let the case fade from memory, keeping pressure on authorities and ensuring Cotten's name remained associated with fraud. Years after Cotten's supposed death, fundamental questions remain unanswered. Is Gerald Cotten truly dead, or is he living under a new identity somewhere in the world? If he's dead, what happened to the missing $180 million? Did he gamble it all away? Hide it in untraceable wallets? Convert it to cash and physical assets? Was Jennifer Robertson truly ignorant or complicit? Did other QuadrigaCX employees know about the fraud? The case file remains technically open, but with each passing year, answers become less likely. The truth may be buried with Cotten, if he's actually in that grave. QuadrigaCX's collapse had ripple effects far beyond its direct victims. It damaged trust in Canadian cryptocurrency businesses. It made investors worldwide more skeptical of exchanges. Insurance companies became reluctant to underwrite crypto platforms. Banks became more hostile to cryptocurrency businesses, viewing them as unacceptable risks. The case became a cautionary tale taught in business schools and fraud investigation courses. Cotten's name became synonymous with cryptocurrency fraud. His legacy, whether he's alive or dead, is the destruction of trust. He proved that in the cryptocurrency world, where anonymity and decentralization are celebrated, those same features can enable spectacular crimes. There's a profound irony at the heart of the QuadrigaCX story. Cryptocurrency was designed to eliminate the need for trusted intermediaries. Bitcoin's creator, the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto, built a system where you didn't need to trust banks or governments. You could verify everything yourself through the blockchain. Yet QuadrigaCX's customers abandoned these principles, trusting Cotten and his exchange just as they might trust a traditional bank. They gave up control of their private keys for convenience. The technology that promised to eliminate trust-based systems was undermined by human nature. People wanted convenience more than security, and fraudsters exploited that fundamental weakness. The Netflix documentary ended with investigators standing at Cotten's grave, contemplating the sealed vault of truth beneath their feet. They acknowledged they might never know for certain whether he's really there. The filmmaker posed the question directly to the camera: do you believe Gerald Cotten is dead? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Because in the end, belief is all we have. We can examine evidence, trace money, interview witnesses, analyze psychology. But without exhuming that body, without definitive proof, the QuadrigaCX case remains suspended between competing narratives, each plausible, neither proven. Some investigators haven't given up. Private detectives, hired by victim groups, continue searching for traces of Cotten. They monitor airports, border crossings, and financial transactions in countries known for harboring fugitives. They use facial recognition software on social media photos. They track cryptocurrency wallets for suspicious activity. It's painstaking work with minimal resources, searching for a man who might be dead, who might have changed his appearance, who might be anywhere in the world. Or nowhere. But for victims who lost everything, the search provides purpose. As long as there's a possibility Cotten is alive, there's a possibility of justice. QuadrigaCX exemplifies cryptocurrency's fundamental challenge. The technology is revolutionary, offering financial freedom and innovation. But that freedom cuts both ways. The same features that let ordinary people escape government control also let fraudsters escape oversight. The same anonymity that protects dissidents also protects criminals. Cryptocurrency exists in a perpetual tension between liberty and security, innovation and regulation. QuadrigaCX showed what happens when the balance tips too far toward unchecked freedom. It's a wild west where fortunes can be made and lost instantly, where sheriffs are scarce and outlaws thrive. The question isn't whether cryptocurrency has value. It's whether we can harness that value without enabling the Gerald Cottens of the world. Statistically minded analysts have attempted to calculate the probability that Cotten is alive. They factor in the medical likelihood of his death at 30, the circumstances in India, the timing relative to the fraud's exposure, the patterns of past death hoaxes, and the absence of confirmed sightings. Different analysts reach different conclusions. Some estimate perhaps a 20% chance he's alive. Others put it closer to 50-50. These are educated guesses, not definitive answers. What they share is acknowledgement of genuine uncertainty. This isn't a case where the evidence clearly points one direction. It's genuinely ambiguous, a Schrödinger's fraudster, simultaneously dead and alive until definitively observed. Perhaps the most enduring impact of the QuadrigaCX scandal isn't the money lost or regulations changed. It's the legacy of doubt. Every cryptocurrency entrepreneur now operates under suspicion. Every exchange faces skeptical questions about reserves and security. Customers demand proof of assets. Regulators scrutinize operations. The easy trust of cryptocurrency's early days is gone, replaced by a culture of verification. In a strange way, this might be QuadrigaCX's positive legacy. Cotten's fraud, whether he's alive or dead, taught the cryptocurrency community that blind trust is dangerous. In a system designed to be trustless, that might be the most important lesson. So is the crypto king dead or alive? The honest answer is that we don't know, and may never know with certainty. The evidence suggests that Gerald Cotten ran a massive fraud, stealing hundreds of millions from trusting customers. Whether he died in India as reported, or staged an elaborate escape, the core crime is the same. 115,000 people lost their money. The cryptocurrency world lost innocence. And somewhere, whether in a grave in Nova Scotia or on a beach in a country without extradition, Gerald Cotten exists in infamy. The question of his physical location matters less than the certainty of his legacy, one of history's most audacious cryptocurrency frauds. What we know for certain is this: QuadrigaCX was a fraud. Customer funds were stolen and gambled away. Cotten created fake accounts and manipulated markets. He lived extravagantly on stolen money. When the scheme collapsed, whether through death or design, $250 million vanished. Victims received cents on the dollar. No one was criminally prosecuted. And cryptocurrency exchanges worldwide became slightly more honest, slightly more transparent, forced to prove they weren't the next QuadrigaCX. In the end, that might be the only justice victims receive. Not their money back, but the knowledge that their loss forced an industry to change.